I mean, come on, it's a fan project. There's no way a bunch of random Star Wars fans made a version that's better than an official release. So, a while back, I made a video discussing the theatrical versions of the original Star Wars trilogy that were featured as bonus features on the 2006 DVD release of the original trilogy. That video has since gone on to garner a ridiculous amount of views, far more than any other video I've released on this channel thus far. Thank you for that, by the way. It means a lot and I truly appreciate it. In that video, I talked about the 4K 77, 4K 80, and 4K 83 projects, the famous fan projects that aim to preserve the original theatrical versions of the original trilogy by scanning original theatrical film prints in 4K, cleaning them at 4K, rendering them at 4K, and releasing them in 4K. In that video, I said that I had not seen any of the 4K fan projects because I had not been able to figure out how to properly obtain them. After that video blew up, I had fans reach out to me who were able to help me obtain the latest versions of 4K 77, 4K 80, and 4K 83. In reality, I found the process of downloading those movies actually to be quite easy and nowhere near as hard as I conveyed the process to be in my video, but more on that in a minute. Oh, and before anybody accuses me of piracy, I've already legally purchased all of these movies multiple times on 3 different formats, because God forbid I denied Disney even a single one of my hard-earned dollars. I have since downloaded and watched 4K 77, 4K 80, and 4K 83. And I gotta say, after watching these versions of A New Hope, The Empire Strikes Back, and Return of the Jedi, I don't know if I'm ever going to ever go back to the official versions ever again. Let me explain. I actually tried to access the 4K projects years ago, but for whatever reason, I could never actually figure out how to download the video files. Looking back at how easy it was for me to do it recently, I would blame my inability to access the 4K projects on the fact that I was still a dumb teenager at that point. When I discovered the 2006 DVD release of the theatrical versions I talked about in my previous video, I had a renewed interest in accessing the 4K projects years after I had first tried to get access to them. I had someone who was kind enough to contact me personally and provide me with an invitation code to access the 4K project forums, and another individual even emailed me a set of instructions to download the video files. With their help, I was finally able to download all 3 films. Funnily enough, finding the download links for the video files was the easiest part of the process because I soon found that my average spec laptop and subpar internet connection did not cope well with downloading files that averaged around 60 gigabytes each.
What the fuck, dude? Dude, what the fuck?
After fighting with my setup and internet, I was finally able to download the video files onto my external hard drive. Moral of the story is, if you have a half-decent computer with a good internet connection, the process of downloading each 4K project is actually quite easy. Everything you need to download the movies is located on the Project 4K website, which I'll link in the description below. Now that I had all 3 films ready to go on a hard drive, well, I think you know what happens next.
Fun begins.
Considering that each film literally has 4K in the title, it would be doing these films a disservice to not watch them in 4K. This requires a 4K display with a connected device capable of outputting 4K picture that can also play video files off of a USB hard drive. That being said, if you do not have the ability to play back the files in 4K, don't worry, each movie still looks incredible on a regular HD display. As long as you have a half decent laptop that can handle playing back these large files, you can download the movies straight onto your laptop and watch them on it straight away. I watched all 3 movies by hooking up my hard drive with the movies on it to my PS5 and watched them on a 4K TV, which is a method I would assume that a few of you would already have access to. That being said, the playback does kind of freak out if you skip around too much, but if you press play and just let the movie run, the playback is perfect. Now that all the technical stuff is out of the way, are the movies themselves actually any damn good? Yes. Yes, they are. They are fucking incredible.
The Polynesian spa. Come on, New Zealand, try something new.
The theatrical version of A New Hope is the most dramatically different film in the trilogy when compared to the special editions. First things first, 4K 77's picture quality may very well be the best this film has ever looked. I watched 4K 77 version 1.4 with no DNR or digital noise reduction for the uninitiated, meaning my video still had a generous amount of film grain, which felt appropriate considering how old this movie is. There is no question that this is a proper film scan job. The grain is intact and minor imperfections from the film show up on the screen. While the film aesthetic might be unattractive for some, personally considering that I am trying to watch Star Wars as it was in 1977, the pros and cons of shooting on film being present in this cut only adds to the experience for me. And, you know, that was all they had back in the day. There are also no major imperfections present in this version, which is a relief. There is a DNR'd version of 1.4 of 4K 77, if that is what you desire, but the true filmic look is a key part of this experience for me. I think what I love most about 4K 77 is how untouched the movie is. As good as the picture quality is on the latest official releases of the original trilogy, the current version of those movies feels like a visual Frankenstein compared to what is presented here. A New Hope has been tampered with so much over the decades that the latest version of the film looks very different to what is presented here. 4K 77 removes decades worth of color grading changes, audio adjustments, and most importantly, there is no special edition CGI present. Han is the only one to shoot, there's no Jabba, no CGI dinosaurs, blah blah blah, you get what I'm saying. The true appeal of 4K 77 is that this is the version of Star Wars that captured the hearts and minds of millions all the way back in 1977. The version of the film that gave birth to the monster of a franchise that Star Wars has since become. Because I grew up watching the special editions, I don't get the full benefits of this time capsule, but for the fans that saw Star Wars when it first came out in 1977, the experience they have with 4K 77 would be priceless. 4K 77 is the highlight of the trilogy because it is clear that the movie that started it all had to be perfect. Pretty much every point I make about 4K 77 carries over to 4K 80 and 4K 83, so I'll be brief with my thoughts on the rest of the trilogy.
Yo dudes, the Empire's pretty chill. Maybe you could join it or something.
Empire is the most untouched film of the trilogy, and the changes that the special edition did make, I would argue, are improvements. The extra shots of the Wampa, changing the Emperor to Anne McDermott, and adding extra scenery to Cloud City are examples of the good that the special editions did do. But again, like every 4K project, with 4K 80 removing the 90s CGI, the visual identity of the film remains a lot more consistent with the film that originally came out in the 80s, and I appreciate that a lot. Empire is the only project out of all 3 films that is still in a beta state, meaning the restoration process isn't 100% complete, because for Empire, the project is working with damaged and faded film copies. 4K 80 is only available in standard HD for now, but considering it isn't finished, it still looks great. Sure, the picture and cleanup isn't as good as A New Hope or Return of the Jedi, but this is still the theatrical version of Empire, and it still looks incredible.
Out.
Ted, I got your voucher.
Out! There.
I'm sorry about that. I'm so sorry. We'll have him like burned and well,
I don't even
executed
know
and
who
burned.
that guy is.
I've always loved Return of the Jedi more than most people, so seeing the theatrical version was a real treat. Seeing it without the Jedi rock musical number, Darth Vader screaming, and digital blinking Ewoks. Ugh. Really reinforces how different these movies were back in the day. I think Jedi has the most unnecessary changes out of all 3 films, whether that be something as big as the aforementioned Jedi rock musical number, or something as trivial as removing Darth Vader's eyebrows. 4K 83 looks near flawless as well, because according to the Project 4K website, they had a pristine Return of the Jedi film print for scanning. The near perfect film scan combined with the removal of major CGI sequences added by the special edition helps Jedi retain the dirty 80s practical effects aesthetic that I love about the film, and does proper justice to the climactic final chapter in one of the greatest trilogies of all time. There is no doubt in my mind, if you are looking for the true Star Wars theatrical experience, 4K 77, 4K 80, and 4K 83 are the films that you are looking for. All 3 films as they currently exist come highly recommended from myself and countless other fans. The special editions versus the theatrical editions of the original trilogy is a tired argument by this point. In most cases, fans will always want to watch the version of Star Wars that introduced them to the franchise. If you saw the film when it was first released, then of course you would want to relive the same film that made you fall in love with the entire franchise. If your first introduction to the original trilogy was the special editions, whether that was watching it in the cinemas, DVD, or streaming, then that's probably the version of the movie that you want to watch, because again, that's the movie that made you fall in love with the franchise. This is all a generalization, of course, but that's usually the motivation behind why people watch the version of Star Wars that they do. They usually want to watch the version that was their first experience. Personally, my introduction to the original trilogy was watching the special editions on DVD, and that was the version that I grew up with. I've been a Star Wars fan for over a decade now, which I know that's not as long as some of you, but it's a long time for me nonetheless. So after a decade of watching these special editions, I've only just seen the theatrical versions for the first time this year. There are things I still love about both versions. Some of the CGI additions to the special edition, like the enhanced Battle of Yavin, and adding a lot more stormtroopers to Han's iconic retreat on the Death Star, just helps make the film feel more alive and energetic. But on the other hand, 4K 77 feels a lot more cohesive as a film, considering it isn't mixing 70s visual effects with 90s CGI. As a massive prequels fan, I appreciate the special editions visual and audio changes done in an attempt to make the 2 trilogies more consistent with each other, but I also appreciate watching a version of the movie that hasn't been DNR'd to hell and gone through decades worth of color grading changes. There are pros and cons for each version. Personally, I think the differences between the theatrical versions and the special editions are very similar to the kind of stuff we are seeing with the current popularity of video game remakes. We have 2 different versions of what is essentially the same piece of media. One is the original product that was completed to the standards and limitations of the time. The other is the remake that that builds the game again with modern hardware and gameplay standards, and even adds a couple of new features and makes slight changes to a couple of story elements. Technically, they are still the same game, but there are enough differences between the two where arguably each one presents a different experience of the same fundamental premise. But enough bullshit. What version do I like more? The 4K projects or the latest official special edition releases? I think I'm going to have to go with the 4K projects, almost purely because of the fact that I think these versions feel like authentic films instead of the official re-releases, which at this point feel like movies that George Lucas spent decades updating and patching as if they started off as broken video games. The Project 4K film scans look incredible, and they did what George Lucas refused to do and preserved the original films that started everything. In saying that, I don't think I'm going to exclusively watch these versions from now on. I still like the special editions regardless, and the 4K projects hold more of a novelty value to me rather than being the only true version of Star Wars. I guess from now on, it'll depend what I'm in the mood for on that day. Regardless, I still believe that Star Wars fans should watch whatever version of Star Wars they want, because fundamentally, we are all still watching and loving the same movie.
The interesting thing is they call it pyroprocessing, but it's a molten salt process. They're dissolving.
The 4K project is probably the single most important Star Wars fan project to ever be undertaken, because despite George Lucas, Fox, and Disney doing their damn best to bury the original versions of the original trilogy, a few dedicated fans have ensured that the original trilogy, as it was first released in cinemas, will now never die. Despite claiming not to be professional film restoration experts, this is an incredible 4K film scan that rivals professional work, and in so many ways is better than the official 4K versions of the films that are currently available. Without this fan project and the countless others like it, the original theatrical versions of the original trilogy would simply not exist anymore, or at the very least not look this good. So if for some reason you're still on the fence about checking out Project 4K, just do it. If you are a Star Wars fan, then you shouldn't deny yourself the chance to see the films as they were first presented in cinemas. Like I said before, I'll leave a link to the project in the description below so you can check it out yourself. But now I want more. Where's the 4K restoration of the Star Wars Holiday Special? Get that happening. I want to see Grandpa Wookiee jerking off in 4K.
Oh, we are excited, aren't we?
Take that, George Lucas. But most importantly, never forget that no matter what version of Star Wars we watch and love, at the end of the day, we are all Star Wars fans. Let's not argue about which version is best and just let people watch whatever version they love. Let's let Star Wars fans watch Star Wars. Because while we all watch different versions, we all still love the same movie.